Dancing Star Foundation and Earth Service welcome you to another episode of State of the Earth. I'm co-host Peter Kreitler.
And I'm Alexandra Paul.
It is our privilege today to have back several wonderful panelists who have dedicated their lives to making this fragile Earth, our island home, a better place.
Our guests today are Ingrid Newkirk, Rod Nash, John Hart, Paul Ehrlich, Michael Tobias, and Bob Gillespie. Welcome, and thank you for being here. In this show, we're going to talk about the bigger picture, systems and solutions, the kind of society systems that have gotten us to where we are, and what changes we need to make within our culture and mindset to survive.
I looked at this from a little different way. I looked at the letter C a while back, and I began to realize that cows, cars, chlorine, chlorofluorocarbons, conception, consumption, clear-cutting, chopsticks, communism, cancer, cigarettes, conferences, conventions, committees, capitalism, and the church was killing the planet. The Earth's killer Cs. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like us to start with perhaps taking a look at the church. What is the church doing as a system to help? Religion affects population growth. For me, capitalism wants more people and the church wants more people because without it, neither of them survive. Fair assumption?
But you're saying it helps the planet. I would think that it would hinder the planet. In your work, have you seen the church help or hinder population growth?
Well, it depends on what country you're in. If you're a nun or a monk and you're celibate and you're practicing simplicity, you're moving in the right direction. But humans invent religions and they invent politics and economics and judiciary systems. Actually, anything that has a paper involved with it is a human invention. It could be art and so forth. And these inventions we give power to, like, for example, communism or capitalism or money. I always like to take a $100 bill when I'm talking about money and burn it up because I just say it's a piece of paper. But we give value to that. And these systems that are created are all artificial. So I think someone was saying earlier, as soon as we invented fire, we started wearing clothes, started clubbing each other, and created agricultural systems that allowed for surplus to create civilizations. We all started off in the wrong direction. And I don't know who, got the whole idea of kingdoms. I mean, when somebody has divine rights, and yet you can have people going into the White House, starting wars, and getting off scot-free. Those systems are not working for us. And our biological realities, our physical realities, are not in sync with the systems that are moving us all in the wrong direction. Because we've invented technologies that have allowed us to create cities and civilizations that are not sustainable. And we have too many people living at lifestyles and livelihoods that are not going to be sustained in the future. And as a result, we are leaving our children with a whole bunch of systems that are dysfunctional.
Well, I'd like to, you brought up church. I'd like to go back as a historian and look at that a little bit. No question in my mind that organized religion, particularly as we know it here in the West, came out of an agricultural, pastoral society that emphasized divisions between humans and the rest of nature, what we call in the intellectual history dualism. And it began to draw lines on the map and lines in our mind, and began to make us think that we were divine beings, the rest of nature was an object, what we call the objectification of nature, removing the sacredness or the enchantment of the natural world. Huge dividing point about 10,000 years before the present, beginning of herding and agriculture. So with that in mind, you begin to look at the Old Testament, the New Testament, as a document coming out of that kind of civilization where we do see us as the world created for us, the rest of nature there to serve us. The environmental movement, any kind of respect for nature has had to battle that kind of religious outlook, it seems to me, for several thousand years. And the battle's starting to change a little bit.
Yes.
There is some greening now of religion. I used that as a chapter title in a Rights of Nature book I wrote. There is some greening of religion.
I think one thing I find heartening, as disheartening as I find religion, is the fact that there has been some greening of it, and there also now are chairs in animal rights and religion that have sprung up. We have people like the Reverend Andrew Lindsay in the UK. They're giving sermons from the pulpit talking about how perhaps not that we're not demigods and the rest of the animal kingdom are not to be concerned about, but giving talks about how we must be compassionate, that the foundation of religion is compassionate. And the same thing has happened with Islam. There is now an Islamic website of concern for the environment and animals, which
The Eastern Pope said it was a
little bit.
sin to force
That's
the species to extinction.
Santa
Yes,
Do
Barbara
we,
Declaration.
do we need to have the church on our side to win this effort to survive?
This time of, I think at this very
The
this
church
very
or the
moment
different
in time,
religions, I
yes.
shouldn't just say church, because
Well,
obviously there's...
And the Pope came out against factory farming
That's right.
too.
Also put solar power in the Vatican. But and in Islam, you've got within the Quran surahs which prescribe water holes for animals. There's absolute must. Interdependency between animals in
No
Islam.
beating of animals and so on.
So how is the church affecting the environment negatively or positively?
Well, Paul mentioned the Santa Barbara Declaration and His All Holiness Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, who commands the allegiance of some 300 million Greek and Russian Orthodox around the world. He was the first to really, as Paul said, conjoin the word sin with destruction of the environment, killing of animals. But if you then go way back before that, 25,000 years ago when they were worshiping in caves and then worshiping animals in caves, and we've been interpreting it ever since. And I like to think of it as almost tectonic plates where we're slipping away from that original nature that we all had, where we were truly unified with the natural world. Now, as of some 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years ago, when writing started tabulating for purposes of slave keeping and agricultural stock taking, inventorying of grain in the Levant, in the Middle East, if you will, we've become a dominant species. And we have forgotten that not that long ago, biologically speaking, we were one. I know it's a cliche, but we were truly one with nature. And it seems to me that churches have grown up buying into this globally religious notion that we are a superior species. I'm sorry.
Rod, you mentioned that too, that we've separated ourselves through the church.
Yes, that dualism we've paid a huge price for that separation and that belief. And one of the struggles, I believe, of ecology and one of the struggles of the environmental movement is to eliminate that kind of thinking and make us believe that we are part of the natural community. We're members and not masters. Members and not masters.
But there's
Hard
a-
lesson to learn if you are orthodox in your religious beliefs.
You know,
I
we've
find that the
been-
church makes us specious, that humans are better than everybody, and that way we can use animals, for example, as we like.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, I think one of the interesting things we were talking about earlier is going into space and whether that paradigm will go with us into space. Because on the side of the first spaceships or rockets, or NASA used to put something, I don't think they do anymore, but it's "we come in peace." And of course that's complete rubbish, because we don't come in peace at all. What we're really saying is, if you're out there and you're stronger than we are, we come in peace. Please don't hurt us. Because if we go out there and we find any other form of life, because we're certainly surrounded by every conceivable form of life on Earth and in the seas and the skies, if we have the power to, we'll eat them, we'll dissect them, we'll wear them, we'll
Mine
put them in
them.
a zoo, yes, we'll do everything to them. So that is a horrid, when you see it in a space context, I think it makes it so clear what's wrong here, and that's where the church has gone. And by the church, I mean where most religions have gone, is that dominant.
It was with the development of the unethical monotheisms, basically. In other words, the early religions were tolerant of each other and just finding different ways of instrumentally getting the gods to deliver what they wanted. And all of this stuff about how wonderful the monotheisms are is just nonsense.
Yeah,
There
Marx
was-
nailed it. Marx nailed the opiate of the masses and so forth.
And we're still, I mean, look, we're still having ethnic cleansing
Yes.
going on.
Yeah, and the church keeps apologizing. Various religions, mostly the church it seems, keeps apologizing for the bad behavior of the past. But really there's a principle that runs through the whole thing, which is if you are against discrimination, if you're against needless violence, if you are an all-encompassing compassion, which is what the church, all of them, is supposed to be about, then you don't violate things one by one and have to then pull back and say, I'm sorry for this
Well,
one.
you also
sorry for
wouldn't
that
be
one.
still, for instance, condemning hundreds of thousands of women to death each year by your policies on abortion, and you wouldn't be condemning even larger numbers of people to considerable misery because they're having children they didn't want to have, and so on. So the whole idea that the church is above criticism is, fortunately, I think, beginning to dissolve.
The Pope's now ready to embrace condoms in a few limited instances.
Unfortunately, that won't help dogs and cats.
No.
We have that overpopulation problem
That's
that
right.
they can't open the package.
Absolutely.
But yes, it's a good step.